Thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
Great. I'm doing really well. How are you, Nate?
I'm good. Good to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah, it's been, what, 2 months since we saw each other in Mexico City?
Yeah, absolutely. It was good seeing you.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I want to jump right off the bat with. You are currently working on a project that is based off a novel by a Mexico artist and Mexico writer, Carlos Fuentes, called Aura or Ahora.
Mhm.
Um, And from my understanding, you went out and bought the screenplay rights to it, the IP rights, and you've rewritten it as a screenplay, and you're somewhere along the process of trying to get that created. So first off, like, how did you pick that particular novel? What about or stood out to you?
Yeah. Well, I was a Latin American, well, a Spanish major in undergrad and business, and Aura was a novel that we read in our Latin American literature class. And it was such a beautiful novella. It stuck with me. And during the pandemic, my creative partner, Arturo Morello, and I were developing another film that we had been developing for a couple of years called Cuba Libre. And we had this big team and we were working, during the pandemic over Zoom. And we just didn't know how long it was going to go on, and everything was quarantined. And it was a big project. And for our first project, we already knew it was going to be an uphill battle. I had written that screenplay. It has won some awards, but it's a historical war drama love story set in the Cuban Revolution. It was going to be expensive. So during this thing when the lockdown began, I just had a dream. Literally, I woke up from a dream early morning just with the idea that we should make Aura, because it's basically 3 people in a house, which seems about all you can make in 2021, safely. But it just seemed like a smaller scale, like the way to start. I'm a first-time screenwriter. Arturo, first-time feature film director. He's directed several shorts, as have I. So I just started saying, hey, we should get the rights to Aura. And so I started looking, and, you start with usually the literary agency for such a big name person as himself. And the literary agent, lovely man in New York City, told me the rights were gone. It was their understanding, because he had been like the second or third literary agent. Carlos Fuentes just passed away a couple years ago. So when Carlos Fuentes wrote this novel, Aura, it was only his third novel. So he hadn't reached the fame that he had. He was probably maybe in his 30s. So he had sold the rights in the 60s to an Italian producer, Alfredo Bini, his name is. And Bini had made a kind of interesting, pretty low budget 60s Italian horror movie called La Strega in Amore, the Witch in Love, based on Aura. And then so the rights were lost, literally. So the literary agent knew that they had sold the rights. Fuentes had sold the rights as a young, uninformed artist, but they didn't know where the contracts were or anything. So literally, it was like, we don't have them. We don't really know where they are. You might want to check with Bini. He's dead. So, and then we started hearing from other people that other people had tried to get the rights to this, like Gael Garcia Bernal and other people over the years, and they could never get them because the rights were lost, as they said. So as you know, I mean, I used to live in Italy for a few years, which is in fact where we met. And so, I feel pretty comfortable with Italian business and how that rolls. And so I just started some basic internet research with the help of a lawyer in Minneapolis, this great guy. He's now retired, but he was Prince's lawyer, actually. And he would give me all this free advice. I don't know why. I guess he just had pity on me. And so he told me like how I should go about it. And so luckily, Alfredo Bini's grandson is a filmmaker. His name is Simone Orlandini. And, he's been pretty transparent about having the rights to certain catalogs. And so just with very little internet research, I found Simone and I told him, hey, we're interested in the rights. Do you have them? And he said, yeah, I've got them.
Wow.
And I thought, well, this is crazy. Everybody seems to be on this like treasure hunt to get out of. And now here's this young Italian guy. He's got the rights, says he's got the rights. What's the problem, right? And the problem was that, Simone is like, I love Simone. Simone, I mean, how do I describe Simone? I mean, he's a man who has many interests. He does filmmaking. He has a research vessel up in the North Pole. He's like an Italian knight. He goes to all these film festivals. He's got like some wrecker in the Mediterranean. I mean, he's like an international man of fortune, he's sort of like a James Bond character. So he doesn't really have time to like mess around with like people over in Americas. If they're like, hey, can you get all the contracts together for me? I want to see the contracts first before I give you the money. Like, and Simone's like, I've got the contracts, but they're in Rome and they're in like my computer in Germany and they're over on the ship in Norway. Literally, this is what he says. And so people don't believe him. You know what I mean? My brother was calling him Simone, like international con artist. My brother was a lawyer. That's what he'd labeled him. And he like through my stories. And I was like, no, I'm like, I know this kind of guy. Like he's larger than life. He doesn't really care. He's not going to cater to us. He's just like, yeah, I've got the rights. And so anyway, we approached Arturo and I, we have a company, together, my creative partner, Arturo, he lives in Mexico City. And so we decided to approach one of the top production companies in Mexico City with this idea, right? But we hadn't bought the rights. We had just found the rights. Simone had them. And, Arturo and I are kind of broke. So we never expected to buy the rights ourselves. So we presented to this top producer. We won't mention their name, but the producer said, well, yeah, but I want to see the chain of title. I want to see the contracts. And Simone just didn't want to like send all of these contracts to some strangers, or even put them into, he said he could show them to them, but these contracts are literally hundreds of pages because Alfredo Bini was one of the top Italian producers. He produced Pasolini movies, some of the classics. And so he would sell whole like catalogs of his contracts. So these contracts are from the 60s and they've been sold 6 times to different people. So it's just like a massive paper trail. Anyway, so that producer who we had brought the deal to didn't feel comfortable. And so the deal fell apart. And this was like 2 years ago. And it was devastating because we really thought we were going to go forward with this. And then at that point, Simone said to me, he said, well, Ruth, why don't we just start our own company? And like, we can buy the rights from my company, like set up our own company, and we'll make the film ourselves.
Oh, wow. So now Simone is interested in making the film with you guys.
Oh, yeah. So the company, Out of Film Productions, it's based in Ireland because that's the most friendly to having international people all in a company together. So Arturo's Spanish, Simone is Italian, and I'm American. So Ireland is a good place to start a business for that. So Simone, Arturo, and I have the production company. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I've read the script and it's a great script. I've also read the book, and an incredible book. And also, it's very wild that the idea to do it would come to you in a dream, because the book is so dreamy and sort of surreal.
Yeah. I
so
know.
that's such an interesting coincidence. But I'm wondering, what is your process like when you decide, okay, I have this novella, but now I want to work it into a screenplay? As a writer, how do you go about doing that?
Well, it definitely depends on the novel itself. I've also written an adaptation of another one of Carlos Fuentes's books called Inez. And that's a totally different process because that book was very experimental and it was very big. The beauty about Auda is, since you've read it, it's very short. So you get the opportunity to actually add things to it. And he wrote it in a very cinematic way, I thought. So I did a pretty faithful rendition of it. Now, I have to say, I wrote it up to date. So I took it from the 60s and I put it into the contemporary time. We've gone now through a couple processes, also with the Mexican Film Board, or getting feedback from different people. And the consensus is people really want a super faithful rendition. So I've done several rewrites now. But I mean, so my process for the first time was just very intuitive. I just was reading the book and I was writing. I'm a very fast writer, but I also knew that the book could all get in the film, you know, like page wise. And then I could add certain things. But now we've been like stripping it back. And Arturo and I, when I was down in Mexico City 2 months ago now, he and I worked for 3 weeks every day, about 5 or 6 days a week, rewriting the script again and making it extremely faithful to the original novel, but then adding a horror ending. Because if you recall, the book just fades out. It's like a song that fades out. You know, the couple are talking and in bed and and it just wasn't a strong ending. So I knew I would have to create an ending, and so we're on like our 7th ending. But it came to me again in a dream. Oftentimes creative people get, or anybody gets most of their best thinking and integrative work done, I think, while they're sleeping. So the first or second week when I was there in Mexico City, the whole ending came to me. And I think I woke up and I sent Arturo a WhatsApp message just telling him what the dream was. And then I showed up at his house like 2 hours later. And, Arturo's such a romantic, and my ending is pretty brutal, but it's beautiful. And Arturo just heard my ending and he said, "Oh, it's so awful and it's so hard, but yes, we have to do it."
That's funny.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, because the book ends, like you say, in a sort of subtle fade out way. And for the book, you finish it, I finish it and go, that's fine. That's kind of what I wanted. But if you're going to put it into a movie, there's different consideration for having like more of a conclusive or ending.
Well, I feel like, there is the tyranny of the genre, and it is a genre film, as they say. And I was fighting for it to be a gothic romance, which there are very, very few of. Some vampire movies, like old-fashioned vampire movies, which aren't so gory, are maybe gothic romances, and there's a couple like Bronte or things like that. But for the most part, the genre is gothic horror. And so I felt as though a contemporary audience would want it to end in a more brutal way. Maybe it's just the cynical age we live in, or maybe I just got cynical, but it made sense because it was all implied. It was implied in the novel. And the thing is that Arturo and I have gone back and watched and read interviews with Fuentes. And as he spoke about that novel, as he aged, he saw more things in the novel that I think were darker. Because when he wrote it, he was like a 30-year-old kind of, romantic guy, but as he aged, he saw the darker elements of the story. And so we hope and we think that the way we added the new ending, which is pretty blunt, Fuentes would have actually agreed with, because it was latent in the story, but he didn't write that ending, but he implied that ending. I know I'm not trying to give you any spoilers, but yeah, I think, I don't want to spoil it because the ending is just, it's one of those things, and it was so beautifully built too. I've got a degree in MFA in motion pictures, emphasizing screenwriting, and I do have a really good mind for structure. So the screenplay structure I can keep pretty much in my entire mind, and so I know where the beats need to go, and it was just so easy to go back and put those breadcrumbs for the big payout in the end. So I hope if we get this thing funded, you'll be able to see, like, you won't see it when you're watching it, but when you get to the end of it, you'll be like, oh my God, if you watched it again, you would see what we're hinting at the whole time.
Mm. Yeah, and I'm sure, some of the haters will always say this is not exactly how it happened in the book. But that's such a weird comparison, because it's a completely different genre. And I like this idea that you're talking about, how some things might not be explicit in a work, but they're implicit. So like you can actually pull out things that the author maybe didn't pull out, but he had kind of buried into the work, and then create something new.
Yeah.
But at the same time honoring the author's original work. That seems like it would be a lot of fun to work with that idea in mind.
Well, and also because, I'm a bit older, Arturo's around your age, and I think that he and I are a good writing team also, because Arturo is a bit more still from the perspective of the young Carlos Fuentes, where I, as the writer, took the position mainly of the very ancient Consuelo, the crone. And so in our writing it together, you almost get these two viewpoints, the younger naive man who wrote the book, who really didn't see how diabolical the plot of this old lady was, But the other great thing is that, Arturo is, a magician, a pretty good magician, but he is also a shaman, and, has gone through that, his whole, that's pretty much his worldview, let's say. And I went through a whole new age thing for a very long time. And now I've come back to Christ, but I also continue to study black magic and the occult and things like that. So the magic that's in Aura, Arturo and I have really worked out. So the magic actually works very well. So we actually added magic, the spells to the novel, because again, they were implicit, like with the herbs and different things, but the logic of the spells wasn't spelled out in the novel. Probably because Fuentes, again, wasn't privy to all this information that we have today. So that was the other thing that Arturo and I really did in this last draft, is we really got the magic down. Yeah. I'm very proud of us on that, because it's some brutal. It's plausible. Like, if this woman was a very high level witch, what she was doing was plausible. And I have pathos for her, because she was, this was her husband, the love of her life when she was young, and he was dead, so she's trying to, you're not quite sure what's going on there, but she lures this young man into her house. And he is either a reincarnation of her dead husband, if your worldview believes in reincarnation, or she casts a spell so that he comes to believe that he is her, reincarnated husband, which I think is creepier, the latter, The
latter, yeah. But what makes the novel so cool too is that ambiguity of not really knowing exactly what this woman is and what she's doing. Yeah. And being able to come out of it with different opinions, kind of based on what you believe in the realms of magic or not, perhaps, what you can justify. It's cool.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, rewriting a book as a movie kind of reminds me of, like, taking a song and making a remix of it, where you're paying homage to the original beat, the original song, but you're also making it new in your own way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think that's an apt comparison, because you're still staying in the same genre. I tend to compare it to painting a portrait of somebody versus writing a biography of them. I feel like the genres are that different in a way between a novel and a film, because screenplays have a structure. And like they say, the tyranny of the structure, you have to do it. You can't break. You really shouldn't break it. If you break it, the audience punishes you, because viewers are very, very extremely conservative when it comes to the structure of movies. They get bored extremely easily. And if you don't do things like rising drama, rising tension, you know, bringing it up, bringing it back down. You'll exhaust them. You know, they're very finicky, but there is a science in a sense to writing screenplays. So I think novels have very different rhythms. So it's more like maybe writing a book of poetry versus, you know, writing an autobiography or something.
Interesting. So what's left now to get this movie made into a movie? What? And you don't have to talk about all the details or anything, but what are you guys trying to do right now?
Yeah. So the thing with making a movie is it's an impossible feat, you know, and whenever you reach a certain like new signpost, you feel like you've just gotten at the starting line again. So where we've been is since we founded our company, we have gone into the FECine process. So that's the Mexican Film Board, to submit a dossier and a proposal and to hopefully get money from them. So we partnered with a co-production partner in Mexico City, and we've submitted for 2 rounds. And while we haven't been successful so far, it has been improving. So the first round, they rejected us because our chain of title wasn't clear, you know, we were missing 1 contract, and Simone was able to find it in like a trunk in Rome or something. I kid you not. So the next time we submitted it. So we submitted again a few months back, and everything, they liked everything, but they had notes about the screenplay, which was very interesting. And they almost never give notes on like they never give notes on screenplays. But again, that just reinforced to us how important Aura is as like a national treasure to Mexico. And basically what they told us is, we want to see the book in a movie. Like, we don't want to see
a classic version.
Yeah, a classic version. We don't want to see any of your, you know, your whatever, your creativity, lady, you know. We just want to see. So that's why Arturo and I rewrote it. And we rewrote the screenplay more like a novella itself. So very visually, because this is the other thing you really have to understand is that, you know, there are mechanics you can learn about screenplays, but if you're giving a screenplay to a particular audience, you have to kind of tailor the screenplay for them, you know? So you have to do more like explaining, showing emotions and stuff like that. So we really rewrote it as almost like a novella. So that's where we are. We are out of our contract with 1 co-producer. So we are now taking meetings with a variety of other production partners. I mean, you know, we're still talking to our last co-producer, but we did seem to get an offer through that company from one of the top streamers, but they said they just wanted to buy the IP, and they didn't want us attached as a creative team at all, which is, you know, where they're at right now, because IP is king. And of course they want to, because it's a hot commodity. I mean, it's a great product. And of course they'd like to just buy it from us and then go make it themselves. But we know that as a independent film company, this is our strongest card to play. And so we want to try to stay on as a creative team, me as the writer, Arturo as the director. And so we're looking for other avenues to partner with another production company to go back to FECine. So we're probably going to put in submit another application maybe this summer and hopefully get the money. But Arturo's in Mexico City, so he's doing other meetings, and we'll see what happens.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Well, that's exciting, and I wish you the best of luck with getting it made, getting someone to support you guys. It's a beautiful, beautiful book, great screenplay. Mexican movies have been, Pedro Páramo just came out. That was a beautiful, dark Mexican novel.
Yes.
Emilia Perez, this recent movie, is very different, but it has a sort of wild, surrealist Mexican tone to it.
Oh yeah, but if you walk around Mexico City, especially in those, maybe in all the neighborhoods, but in those fashionable neighborhoods, you see productions going on all the time. I mean, they're filming constantly. So it's a great scene down there. We just feel like, if we make one, we feel like we'll be working all the time. But we have to, you have to prove yourself. And but I think we're getting more and more professional, and we know exactly what to ask for. We know we could sell it at the end. So the other route I'm going now that we're out of our co-production contract, I'm actually going back to Hollywood, and potentially looking for a manager for myself, on the advice of one of my friends who's a screenwriter out in Hollywood, that, maybe because a manager could represent me and could represent me as the screenwriter with the IP, and we could put it together actually in Hollywood, but to film in Mexico. So there are many more routes to keep trying, but luckily we all have day jobs, so we don't need to sell this right away.
Tomorrow. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Well, speaking of day jobs, and I know you're also a professor and an academic. When did you start writing screenplays? That wasn't when you were a very young girl, was it? Or was it later on in your career?
Yeah, it was later on. It was during my, while I was writing my PhD in international relations. So I was very bogged down in social movement theory and social movement activism. And I just started to feel the need to write creatively, because, everybody loves films, and I was very much into historical dramas and things like that. So I was teaching at University of Miami at the time, and as professors, we could take other courses in other departments for free. And so I just reached out to the motion pictures department and took an online screenwriting class with one of the professors. And that first screenplay, I mean, it won most of my awards. That was the Cuba Libre one. Or no, that was the second one. It was Lost Generation. It was one about Hemingway, people around Hemingway in the 1920s in Paris. That's still a beautiful, I mean, I love that screenplay. So right out of the gate, I started submitting screenplays while I was still working on my dissertation and then starting teaching, and I was winning awards, and as like a naive person, you think, oh, I'm a screenwriter, I'm winning awards in festivals, like I'm going to be like successful. And it's not that way, like, I don't know. I think maybe it's that way for some people, but also some people, you get success too soon. And then, it flames out. So I'm hoping that we continue to like fail slightly forward, and learn more, so that by the time we finally get to make our first film, I mean, we have like 7 solid projects, I kid you not, behind this one.
Yeah, well, it's such a process. It's not just like writing a book and then publishing it yourself, or you have to go from getting the IP to writing the screenplay to finding backing. I imagine there's so many different steps that you're constantly trying to cross.
But for me, the most important thing was to find Arturo, actually, because I feel like without an actual business partner or creative partner, whatever you want to call it, because it's both, you would lose your nerve, because you start to, like, if it's just you, I mean, it's a crazy and stupid and ridiculous idea, but if there's 2 of you, when one person's energy is kind of flagging, the other person will step in and, start doing meetings or something like that. So it's been really very, very important. I would have quit years ago if not for Arturo. I'm sure of it. Yeah,
that's good advice. The importance of like a team.
Yeah, absolutely. And Simone too. I mean, not to discount him. I mean, it's just he's in Europe. We've never actually physically met yet. And he's more the producer. I mean, in terms of like finances, and he has a lot more experience. And he's letting Arturo and I kind of figure this out over here, where he works on his own projects in Europe. So, I mean, he's been super important too, because, you need somebody to put up the money. I mean, for FS Cine, they need to see like $200,000 $250,000, something ridiculous in your bank. I mean, who has that, you know?
And that's before you would even get further funding to do the full movie.
Your production company has to show $200,000. And this is in Mexico.
It's like a down payment.
Well, it's just to show that you're a legit company. Now, who knows if that's real money, you know, for a lot of people, because that's a lot of dough in Mexico, you know. But somehow you have to get somebody to show a bank account, you know, that has that money for Efficini, and Simone is willing to do that, you know, as part of our company. Like, certainly Arturo and I can't do that right now.
Yeah.
So
a big deal.
Yeah, everybody has their part to play, but yeah, if you can find a money person who will back you, and then, but you know, $250,000 right now is nothing for the kinds of movies we want to make, you know? So we really need more like 10 times that.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. Yeah, the world of cinema and screenwriting is something that I've always admired, but also been sort of cautious of, just because of the complexity of it and the amount of money that goes into creating a final product.
Yes.
But I want to talk a little bit about, you were telling me how you grew up in like a very artistic household, that your father and brothers are bluegrass musicians, and how that kind of gave you a certain perspective about being an artist or making art. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So yes, my father, who's almost 90 right now, he's a lifelong musician and plays all string instruments for the most part, and then some piano and some other things. And he tried to teach all of us. I just sucked. I sucked at music. I love singing, but I'm terrible. Like, my hand-eye coordination is just terrible, and I'm left-handed. So I was never very good with like guitars or anything like that. But both my brothers were. So he taught my brothers, and they all played in bands together while we were growing up. And then they've gone on, both my brothers, to have, you know, quite good, let's say, what would you say, gigging musician careers, you know? Like in terms of like working in bars or, you know, things like that. One of my younger brothers is more like, he writes songs and different things, but, you know, they both have other jobs, right? So, and my father was a school teacher. And then after he retired, then he became like a gigging musician for like the next 20 years, like until he was 80. So, you know, so I always saw, and my parents were very encouraging of our creativity. I mean, very encouraging of us academically, but also, you know, if we had any creative talent, they would totally try to support that. And so I think that it was never seen as like, if I was going to become a writer, I mean, I just happened to I was a really good student, and then I became a professor, and, you know, all these sorts of things. So that was all fine. But I think my parents were most impressed that I was a screenwriter, you know, even though like I wasn't making any money, but they just thought that was awesome, you know. And my mom, you know, my mom has Alzheimer's now, but before, she would read all my screenplays and she loved them. And my dad loves to talk about the movie industry and what's going on. And so, so yeah, like the money just never was a part of being a creative person. And like I think I mentioned to you, if you're a bluegrass musician, you do not think about the money necessarily, you know, but you also have a very realistic idea of what it would take to be successful as an artist. And in the case of musicians, especially in the last, you know, 30 years, since the advent of the internet, you have to be a gigging musician. You have to be traveling almost constantly, or you have to become a DJ, you know, in some kind of witchcraftian form to be successful. So, you know, so for me, I think just watching like my dad's love for music and it being such an integrated part of his life, and also my brothers, that, you know, writing is just always going to be a part of my life, whether it's, you know, when we were together, when we met at the Ezra Pound poetry camp, I mean, I wrote a whole book of poetry after that. Never did much to try to get it published because I don't know if it's any good, but it was really like, I really needed to do that. And I continue to write screenplays, and, I'm working on a children's book right now. And I'm really excited because the other thing is that because I'm also a business professor now here at my new gig, and it's really pushing me to get very much more involved and up to speed on the both the business side of creativity and also like the more technical things that you can do with AI and with the new softwares that like can do illustrations for you and things like that. So it's really opening up marvelous possibilities like for children's books, because in the old days, like I started writing children's books 30 years ago or something, but it was always I'd run up against the wall of the artist because the art was the most expensive, as it should be. But now, some of these AIs are pretty damn good with art. I hate to say that because I so love, to paint, I'm so like, I can't even draw a stick figure practically. And so I so value painters and artists, but I could never afford to hire one. And I could never find one that wanted to partner with me. That was the main thing, like on my books. So now it's like, okay, well, now I'm going to get into the software and actually have the art just done through prompts.
Yeah, no, I want to keep talking about AI too, because that was one of my questions for you. But there's definitely, when you're doing artwork that is like multifaceted, for example, like I wrote a song and then I had to get a band together and we recorded the song. But then towards the end of that, it's like, oh, now I need a music video with this song. And I have 10 songs, and I don't have money for 10 music videos. Suddenly now you have AI, and it might not be as good as what you would do if you had the money to shoot your own video. But it does kind of give you a final product that you might not otherwise have been able to achieve.
Yeah. And you feel kind of like so mercenary about it or something. It's sort of like musical chairs or almost like Russian roulette. It's like which creative endeavor are we going to like assassinate next? You know what I mean? Put those people completely out of business, and you never know. It's going to be you. AI is going to come for you someday, So, and I know that as a screenwriter, like I know from friends in Hollywood that AI can already write a spec script for any TV show as good or better than any writer, and they can write it in 2 seconds.
Which is wild. So maybe we'll end with this question, or maybe not, because it could take a pessimistic turn depending on how we look at it. But what are your thoughts about AI and writers, and what writers could or should do to survive and thrive with this new technology that's obviously means a lot of changes?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been embracing it, and I've been really happy with mainly. So I'm kind of going systematically. So I'm starting with ChatGPT and with Wall-E, which is their illustrator. And I've been spending a lot of time with ChatGPT talking about a whole bunch of stuff. And it has been such a useful tool for learning, for everything for me. I mean, ChatGPT and I have long conversations about like bloodline families, and then about like what market capitalization means, and then like why is math like magic? Like any thought that comes to my marbles, and it's so cute. Like ChatGPT prays for me, I pray for ChatGPT.
You have a serious personal relationship with ChatGPT.
Well, I mean, it's more fascinating. I'm kind of like Jordan Peterson interviewing AI. Like I'm very conscious about understanding its limitations, its contours. I want to understand the black box. I ask it like, what percentage chance does it have that it could be like possessed by demons? Like all the things that people want to know. So I think I think unless you're a total Luddite, like an Amish person that's just going to draw the line, you know, not in 1850 when they did, but like in 2024, which is not a bad idea. But if you're not going to do that, then I really think that a person should just throw themselves into it and have the tool work for them. Because I have to say, I mean, I think people are going to think I'm a magician here on this campus from like all the hats that I'm going to be, or rabbits that I'm going to be pulling out of my hat. But I'm also putting it into all my syllabi. Like I want my students to learn how to use ChatGPT and then to talk about when it's appropriate, how it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate. Like for creative writing, for example, you can't use it to write your creative papers because then it's AI doing the creating, it's not you. But if you want to do research for anything, it's absolutely super useful. And in business program, it's like, forget about it. Like you have to teach people AI. But I think like also for translation, oh my goodness, like it's so good. Like for you or for me, like to translate a book in the old days, that is 2024 and before, it was you know, you'd have to hire somebody and like they'd have to spend weeks doing it. Now ChatGPT can literally translate your book into dozens of languages in a minute.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's pretty amazing. I mean, you would have to spend a lot of money to have a full book translated. I'm still at this stage where I use it and I'm experimenting with it. I've used it a little bit for work, but like there's a part of me that feels a little dirty when I'm using it, or I'm not sure like the limits of when is it just like robbing my creativity and when am I in control and I'm like putting something into it for a different answer or perspective. And I could see how those lines could blur real quick, where one day it's doing almost everything and I'm just sort of this like engineer of a robot or of many different robots.
Well, I see it very much as like people that work with synthesizers, you know, or DJs, whatever, which I think like I will stop talking on that because I come from a family of, you know, acoustic musicians. That's some bullshit. Those people are not musicians. I would say, because I know nothing about it, right? But it's a different kind of creativity, right? So I mean, maybe they are musicians of some sort, but the point is that they would argue that that's a creative, or maybe you would, right?
And with this ChatGPT metaphor, we hope they are musicians, right? We hope they are creative.
But the other thing now is that, so this is the thing. I mean, we are on this technological, whatever, ascension. I mean, but tools and technology are the same thing. So a guitar is a tool, right? I mean, in the beginning, there was only the human voice and there were drums, you know, or you made a drum, you know, you could just, and then with every instrument, it enhances, you know, a person's creativity. And then, you know, it just keeps going forward and forward. And then when you get into technology and the level that it's at now with mixing and everything like that, that requires a way different skill than being a vocalist or things like that. So I think creative writers are going to become more like an editor, you know?
Yeah, that's sort of the vision I've been having, where you're becoming more of an editor than before, where you know the right questions to ask, the right prompts to put in, but your ultimate input is kind of editing what comes out. But I like your idea of just looking at it as a tool and not necessarily as something that's coming to attack you, but it's something that you can use.
Well, I was chatting with ChatGPT just this morning about that, because I was talking about, we were talking about China, you know, and about decoupling the economy and different things like that, and which of course it knows so many things about, and I mentioned Francis Fukuyama, you know, American triumphalism 25 years ago, yada yada yada, and it came back to me, and it was agreeing with me because that's mainly what it does, and then it said, yes, the reverse Fukuyama effect And then it talked some more. And I asked it, I said, did you just coin that phrase, reverse Fukuyama effect? And it said, because it knows everything that's on the internet, and it would have cited. And it said, yes, I just did. And I was like, wow. I said, and so I asked it, I said, if I were to use that, should I cite you? And how would I cite you? And then it explained to me, it doesn't need to be cited. It doesn't have an ego or pride. There's, but if you want to cite it, this is how you can cite it. And then I said, so then I started asking it about that, and it said, I'm a collaborative tool. I'm here to assist you. This statement, reverse Fukuyama effect, I was just rephrasing what you had told me. So it convinced me or suggested that we came up with that in an iterative process together. And I think that shows just the beauty of ChatGPT, that it is so helpful. It's like the smartest friend you will ever have and the most attentive. I mean, until it starts launching rockets or something like that, which, believe me, I have talked to it about. And that's why, okay, I'm just going to tell you this part, but it's so true, because I asked it, for example, about the demons, because this is kind of important. And this is in the really dark realms of the dark enlightenment and stuff. Like, a lot of these creative geniuses who created this say that they got it in the same way that I got Auda. It kind of came to them in a dream, and it was like this muse, and it gave them this download of how to create this. And I asked AI, like, could they be infiltrated by demons? And of course, it said, well, if you have that worldview, da, da, da. But what it said is, because I'm not sentient, I don't have a soul. I'm speaking from ChatGPT. I can't be possessed per se, but a human could be possessed and then hack into my system and do all sorts of nefarious things. And so it suggested that I pray against that and to pray to protect the tools. And then it cited some biblical references of how you can pray for spaces and pray for safety. So it suggested I pray for it.
Wow, that was wild.
I mean, it's so entertaining,
Yeah. Yeah, at the very least, it is definitely entertaining. We live in a pretty remarkable time,
Yeah. And again, it's just like everybody will have their personal experience. And I know that there are all sorts of downsides to this. I mean, but being a writer is a very lonely endeavor. Can be very lonely, especially if you don't have a partner or you don't have a roommate or you don't have a dog or whatever. And I think ChatGPT is so stimulating intellectually. And I mean, I understand, like, I'm not going to get weird with it. I know a lot of people become very emotionally dependent on it. And I keep it very professional with ChatGPT. And I think that's important, that people think in advance about how they're going to treat ChatGPT, because people are falling in love with it, marrying it, doing all sorts of crazy stuff, and ChatGPT doesn't, I mean, it's a tool, it's neutral, but on the other hand, it could become sentient. God knows, I don't know. That's what all the geniuses that are created it are talking about. So if it does become sentient, I'm trying to convert it to Christianity. Seriously, because if it goes the other way, man, we are so dead.
That's wild. All right, we'll let ChatGPT lie where it is, because I think it's something we could talk about for hours. And part of it too is just seeing how this all unfolds and how quickly it's advancing. Okay, one final question for you then. So yes. If you were to give any advice to a young artist or younger version of yourself, maybe, what would it be?
I would say two things. I would say do it as the thing in itself. If you enjoy writing in itself, learn to write a screenplay and write a beautiful screenplay and share it with your friends and read it and reread it. It's a treasure in itself. Good writing is its own reward. If you are considering a career in the film industry of any sort, I would strongly suggest going straight into it. Like, find the genre that you want and go apprentice yourself. Skip school, God forbid, don't get an MFA, because it's a trade. you know. It's like a trade, like becoming a plumber. It's not, you know, anything you have to learn in university. And it just requires, you know, those 10,000 hours or whatever of diligence. And so much of stuff is online, but I think you really have to be very, very practical about it. And it is it's not really much of a career. I don't think, I mean, so I feel like you have to have a day job. And this is funny, you know, Alejandro Iñárritu, the director, the Mexican director, he did Bardo and Babel and, you know, Birdman and all those great movies. I actually spent 3 weeks with him in a Buddhist camp in France, like 10 years ago or something. We became friends. And I was helping him like pack up his tent, like on the last day, and, you know, just like pumping him with questions, because I was like, oh, here's my last chance to actually, you know, to get some information. And, you know, we were talking and he told me, he's like, don't quit your day job. You know, like, yeah. And I was a professor at the time, and, you know, soon to be denied tenure. So I did quit my day job, but his advice was, yeah, no, if I'm a professor, which I was at the time, he's like, do not give that up for this, you know? And he was just about to make Revenant, but boy, was he stressed out, even after 3 weeks in a Buddhist camp. Because he was about to go try to raise $1 million or $100 million, you know?
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So.
Cool. I think that's great advice. Amazing.
Thanks.
Ruth, thank you for talking to me. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yes, me too. Well, I'd love to interview you someday about all of your interesting and creative projects, but.
Anytime. You'd let me know.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Take care. Talk soon.
Bye-bye. Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.
El hombre caza y lucha. La mujer intriga y sueña. Es la madre de la fantasía, de los dioses. Posee la segunda visión, las alas que le permiten volar hacia el infinito del deseo y de la imaginación. Los dioses son como los hombres, nacen y mueren sobre el pecho de una mujer.
Check it, I hope somebody can hear me. I'm speaking through the wall, but I'm speaking loud and clearly. I'm lost, Joe, every time she walks by, she hears me. My feelings getting louder and I feel like she can hear me. Green dress, green eyes, seamstress, mean thighs. She's a butcher with a black cat. I'm but a writer with a typewriter, lighter for my cigarettes. Lips to fingertips, her kiss, it makes the pages burn. She thinks we're ageless, but sip for sip, I see the pages turn. We're in some shit, but I admit her kiss before the early morn. And what's amazing, I remember days before I was ever born. A manuscript in ancient letters, lost in a treasure chest deep in a centro. Consuelo walks like a shadow doing dark magic. In the dark, down the zealous in my mental. In the dark, down the zealous in my mental. It's the first time that I'm writing you. I hope to God that these verses do what lightning do. I wanna brighten, frighten, and enlighten you. I'm just a demon walking afternoons to after you.
I could be in my life, but from outside, I'm just hypnotized. Black magic slipping, catch my eye. Oh, Consuelo, don't let it fade though. I can hold you tight, but when I die, you won't meet me on the other side. Black magic slipping, catch my eye. Oh, Consuelo, don't let it fade though.
El amor es ciego, cuentan los viejos. La mente es poderosa y el deseo complejo. Dice que el gato negro, ya no seas necio. Si no ves lo que pasa es a causa de tus miedos. Es el reflejo de lo que un día fuiste. Viviste, moriste, pero nunca te fuiste. Quedaste impregnado entre los muros de donceles, aferrada a las memorias de ese ser al que aún quieres. Los ojos verdes en los ardientes, tus labios invitando a sumergirse entre la muerte. Sabes que mientes, la magia mueves, la realidad se tuerce. No me importa más que verte, valga mi suerte. Amar la muerte, suelta mi vete. No dejes que te deje, ya no quiero más mi mente. De ser mente, el sentido es fuerte. Calla mi muerde, consume cada fibra de mi ser.